The first sound I remember was the faint high beep of a monitor, steady but distant like it was coming from underwater. The second was the rustle of someone adjusting a clear tube near my face. When I opened my eyes, the ceiling lights above me blurred into starbursts, and for a long second I could not place where I was. Then the oxygen tube brushed my cheek, cool and unfamiliar, and the metallic smell of medical air filled my lungs. An EMT leaned over me, voice low and careful, asking if I could hear him. I blinked twice because speaking felt like pushing through fog. He asked who hurt me. His tone held a hesitation that made the question feel almost apologetic, as if he already suspected the answer and wished it were different. My throat tightened. I whispered the truth that felt heavier than my own body. My family. The words tasted like salt and disbelief. The EMT exchanged a look with a nurse. I did not have the strength to see their full expression, but I saw pity flash across their eyes. As they lifted my gurney toward the bright ER entrance, a red reflection flickered against the glass, the lights from the ambulance pulsing like a heartbeat I could not control. I tried to swallow, but my mouth felt dry like chalk. Someone asked my name again. Ava. Ellington. 25. No allergies. At least I could remember those parts of my life. It made me feel less like I had disappeared. A cold stethoscope touched my collarbone. My breath shook when I exhaled. The nurse asked if I had been dizzy, if I lost consciousness, if there was nausea. I nodded gently because movement made my head throb. She told me I was safe now. Safe. Such a small word with so much weight. I let my eyes close again, but the dark behind my eyelids was not quiet. It flickered with scenes I did not want to return to, scenes still humming under my skin like an echo I could not silence. Crystal chandeliers' soft golden light bouncing off the ceiling, the faint clink of champagne flutes being arranged, a chorus of bright teenage laughter floating through the backyard. The giant silver balloons shaped like an 18 towering over rows of white garden chairs. The sound of a camera shutter clicking as my sister twirled in her designer dress curls, perfectly blown-out nails painted in a pale blush that matched her satin sash. "Happy 18th birthday, Olivia!" Her voice singing along to the guests as they clapped her cheeks, glowing with joy and expectation, the way she looked around as if the world existed only to applaud her. The cake sparkled like it had diamonds hidden beneath the icing. I remember my mother smoothing Olivia's hair, saying, "You look like a princess." I remember standing by the outdoor heater, my palms pressed against the cool steel grounding, myself feeling like I was outside my own body, watching everything from a distance. Then the moment. My father clearing his throat, tapping a spoon against a glass, inviting attention like he always did. The crowd quiet, the proud grin stretching across his face. The way he gestured toward me, confident, almost triumphant, as if he owned the script of the evening and I would simply follow it. "Your older sister has a special surprise for you." My stomach tightened in that instant, the breath caught under my ribs. Olivia's eyes widened with expectation, sparkling like she already saw keys in my hand. A BMW. She said it earlier almost joking, but it was not a joke at all. Not in our house, not in our family where image was currency and expectation was law. I remembered the look my mother had given me before guests arrived. "Do not embarrass us." Her voice crisp low, as if I were a servant being warned to behave, as if I owed them a performance for the privilege of breathing under their roof. A single bead of sweat slid down my neck, even though the night air was cool. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me. I felt the silence swell thick and suffocating. Then I remembered the plan I had rehearsed silently for months, the stillness I practiced like a prayer. My throat burned as I spoke. There is no car. The way the entire lawn seemed to freeze, like even the wind paused. Olivia's face crumpled into disbelief, then shock, then fury. My father's jaw locked. My mother's hand squeezed her clutch so tightly, her knuckles blanched. Then Olivia's voice sharp and entitled. "You owe me." "Dad said you would." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. I heard someone whisper, "Is she serious?" Phones tilted subtly, screens glowing like quiet witnesses. My father stepped closer, trying to smile, but his voice held steel. "Fix this." I did not move. My voice came out softer than I expected, but steadier than I felt. "My money is for my future, not your image." In that second, the evening cracked open. The world shifted. The carefully polished illusion of our family splintered in front of everyone. Now, lying here with the fluorescent lights humming above me, the memory presses against my chest like a weight I cannot fully breathe under. I am not sure when silence became my only defense, or when my quiet turned into a shield. But as the nurse adjusted my oxygen tube and told me to rest, I realized something. Silence did not protect them this time. It protected me. If you have ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, I see you. Tell me I hear you so I know I am not alone. Sometimes the saddest part is realizing you learned to be an adult long before you ever got to be a child. When I think about Fairfield County, I do not picture the glossy magazine shots of waterfront lawns and white fences and manicured hedges that everyone else seems to admire, even though those were the exact scenes right outside our front door. I remember them, of course, but they live in my mind as quiet proof of everything we were expected to be. Perfect. Polished. Pulled together like a ribbon on a gift you are not allowed to open. Our neighborhood sat near the water lined with stone walls and lantern posts, and every home seemed to glow at dusk, as if someone placed a filter over reality to keep cracks from showing. Children in pressed uniforms waited for private school buses each morning. Mothers in tennis skirts compared summer programs and European trips as easily as breathing. I used to watch Olivia glide into her chauffeured car with her monogrammed backpack and ballet bun while I stood at the top of the driveway holding her duffel bag and water bottle like a personal assistant. I was 9 the first time I learned what duty meant in that house. I tied her shoes, zipped her coat, and nodded when my mother said, "Do not forget her hairbrush next time." That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen island finishing homework, while Olivia practiced pliés in the mirror, my mother clapping delicately and saying she was born for grace. When I asked if I could take ballet too, my mother smiled without looking at me. "Olivia has the frame for it. You have other strengths." It sounded like kindness then. Now it sounds like a door quietly locking. I went to public school even though our family could afford everything. They said it would build character. That phrase followed me everywhere like a shadow stitched into my clothes. Build character when I made my own lunch while Olivia got hers delivered in a little cooler. Build character when I stayed at home during school breaks helping fold laundry and label Olivia's riding boots while she traveled to Vermont ski lodges with friends. Build character when I practiced smiling without showing discomfort because Ellington women do not complain. That was my mother's mantra. She said it often, sometimes with pride. Sometimes with gentle disappointment when I asked why something felt unfair. Ellington women stay composed. Ellington women sacrifice. Ellington women do not make scenes. I repeated those lines like a prayer, even when they made my chest feel tight. My father echoed them in his own way. He would pat Olivia's head and tell her she would conquer the world with her charm. Then he would glance at me and say I should be proud to help hold the foundation. As if the only way to matter was to be invisible and sturdy, like the beam behind a wall no one notices until it breaks. Olivia sparkled in every room. I carried extra shoes in case she scuffed hers at an event. She wore pearl earrings and pink bows and had etiquette lessons every Thursday to perfect her thank you notes and posture, while I learned to iron collars and memorize schedules. She never missed a recital. I never missed a chance to clap loudly when she finished my palms stinging long after hers were kissed and congratulated. When relatives visited, they praised her beauty and poise, then turned to me with a gentle smile, like they were searching for something nice to say, and settled on "You are so responsible." Responsible became my identity. The girl who remembered birthdays, who kept secrets, who held coats at parties, and never asked for anything. Some children are treasured, some children are used. I did not understand that divide yet, but I felt it. It lived in the way my mother squeezed my shoulder instead of hugging me as if affection would spoil my usefulness. It lived in the way Olivia flicked her hair when she called me boring secure in her place at the center while I circled the edges. I learned to hold disappointment quietly like a fragile glass in my hands. I learned to smile when my father praised Olivia's SAT tutor and hinted at Ivy League futures for her while I researched community college scholarships alone at the library. I learned to clean up messes before anyone noticed. I learned to swallow questions. Most painful of all, I learned early that love in our house was conditional, awarded like a prize to the daughter who sparkled and withheld from the one who simply stood steady. They did not realize steadiness can grow into strength. They did not see silence as the weapon it would become. They only saw a girl trained to serve the story of someone else's success. They built Olivia's pedestal and handed me the broom to keep it shining. They never imagined I would one day set it down and walk away. By the time Olivia turned 13, our lives had already settled into roles as solid as the marble floors in our foyer. She was the shining promise of our lineage, the embodiment of every glossy brochure fantasy my parents clung to. Horse riding lessons at Fairfield County Hunt Club, designer dresses laid out by a personal stylist on Saturdays, a college consultant from New York, hired years before she even knew what she wanted to study. She floated from rehearsal dinners to charity brunches with a soft smile and practiced politeness that made strangers adore her. People said she looked like the kind of girl who would one day grace magazine covers. They were not wrong about the way she carried herself like a future headline. I knew the behind the scenes, the whispers, the reminders, the rehearsals in front of the mirror where my mother corrected her posture and my father adjusted her tone. It was a production polished and controlled. To the outside world, she sparkled effortlessly. Inside our home, perfection was a requirement, not a gift. I watched from the edges, often literally. At events, I stood near the kitchen doorway or at the table with coats draped over my arm. My place was always a few steps behind. When I turned 16, I started working at the local library in Westport, shelving books and assisting patrons with quiet smiles. It was peaceful there, rows of stories that belonged to no one and everyone at once. I remember coming home from long shifts, smelling like paper and dust, exhausted, but proud of my little paycheck. My mother rarely acknowledged it. She would glance at my uniform and say things like, "Olivia deserves more, she represents our family," as if representing them meant drowning in expectations while I learned to breathe elsewhere. My father would nod without looking up from his laptop spreadsheets glowing on the screen. Investment banking was not just his job, it was his identity. Market Trends quarterly reports firm dinners. He measured success by the cars parked outside our house and the circles we moved in. He often told Olivia that she reflected the future of the Ellington legacy, and then he would tell me to be grateful for stability. Stability felt like a polite way to say invisible. Every Sunday, we attended church services at a historic chapel surrounded by stone pathways and ancient trees. Families dressed in soft pastels, handshakes exchanged like currency. My mother always walked in first, Olivia beside her like a small son, and my father escorted them with a hand pressed lightly on Olivia's shoulder as if guiding a jewel on display. I followed a step behind, balancing my handbag, their jackets, and the sense that I belonged only in the background. After service, there were charity coffee hours and sign-up sheets for fundraising committees. My mother excelled there, offering polished greetings and carefully measured compliments. She never missed an opportunity to mention Olivia's ballet, her equestrian ribbons, her academic potential. When someone asked about me, she smiled kindly and said Ava is very dependable, almost like a pat on the head. Dependable meant predictable, safe, unimpressive. I would nod and sip my coffee, tasting the bitterness mixed with something colder. At home, the walls held photos of Olivia at recitals and competitions, trophies lined in perfect rows. I had certificates from school volunteer papers, library praise letters tucked in a drawer. They did not match the gold frames and perfect lighting on the hallway walls. They did not shine. Olivia's friends visited often girls with glossy hair and familiar last names that echoed through Connecticut society pages. They moved through the house like they owned it, laughing, tossing designer bags onto velvet couches complimenting the fresh flowers and imported pastries. Sometimes I brought them extra napkins or refilled drinks because it was easier than sitting awkwardly on the sofa pretending I belonged. Olivia never thanked me. She did not need to. In her world, attention flowed toward her like a natural law. My world felt like quiet corners and unobserved effort. We hosted events frequently. Garden luncheons, winter charity teas, spring scholarship committees. I was always included on guest lists, but not as a guest. My mother would hand me a list of names and seating charts while she and Olivia got ready upstairs. Fix the place cards, light the candles, adjust the flower arrangements, make sure the catering team knows where to set up. I would move through the rooms with careful steps, placing the world around them like a set dresser preparing a stage. Later guests would rave about our beautiful home and polished hospitality. I would smile and thank them, my hands smelling faintly of lemon polish and linen spray. On the rare occasions I tried to contribute to conversation about my future, perhaps mentioning college applications or books. My father would nod politely and steer the conversation back to Olivia's achievements. It was like being present, but muted my life, a subtitled story no one cared to read. Olivia never questioned it. She thrived in the spotlight, confident and radiant. She walked through country clubs and hotel ballrooms as if they were designed just for her, while I learned to map escape routes through quiet hallways and kitchen corridors. She was the celebration. I was the support beam necessary but unseen. Over time, I convinced myself that being helpful was enough, that holding everything together from the shadows somehow meant I was part of the picture. But truth sits quietly until it grows heavy enough to shift the ground beneath you. In those years, the ground began to tremble slowly at first, like a warning whisper. I did not recognize it for what it was back then. A beginning, a fracture, a future pushing through the surface. If I listened closely, maybe I would have heard a different mantra forming beneath my mother's words. Not Ellington women do not complain. Something truer. Ellington women deserve to be free. I was not ready to believe it yet. But the seed had been planted even in the shadows. Money was never spoken of directly in our house, only implied through the glint of crystal glasses and the silent arrival of new art pieces on the dining room wall. We did not discuss finances, we performed wealth. But somewhere beneath the polished surface of privilege, I began learning the quiet, cruel truth about who paid for that performance. At 17, I started saving for grad school. I worked extra hours at the library, walked instead of taking Ubers, skipped lunch outings with classmates who ordered lattes without checking prices. Every paycheck I split, part for books, part for lunches, the rest tucked into a savings account I opened quietly. It felt like building a secret ladder rung by rung toward a life that was mine. Then one day, my mother came into my room holding an envelope like it was a casual afterthought. The water heater broke, she said lightly, ignoring the panic rising inside me. Your father will reimburse you, darling. We just need to borrow a bit. I remember nodding slowly as if I had always intended to surrender what I had scraped together from hours of shelving books and answering patron questions with tired smiles. She took $600 that day. They never returned it. I pretended not to mind. I pretended the tightness in my chest was just stress about exams. And when the electric bill arrived unexpectedly one spring afternoon, my father placed it in front of me on the kitchen island without meeting my eyes. We're proud of how responsible you are, Ava. The least you can do is contribute. I wrote the check. Olivia breezed past in a tennis skirt that probably cost more than my last 2 paychecks combined, laughing into her phone about weekend plans. No one thanked me. Responsibility became my silent tax, the price of existing as the dependable daughter. Meanwhile, Olivia's life blossomed in luxury. On her 16th birthday, her eyes lit up when she saw the silver Audi parked in our driveway wrapped in a satin bow. She squealed, hugged our parents, took photos under golden balloons, while I stood near the steps clutching the cake knife. The guests clapped. Someone said a girl like her deserves the best. No one looked at me. I thought of my savings account one my mother had borrowed from again 2 months earlier for a temporary fundraiser expense. It had never returned. That summer I picked up extra shifts and skipped buying textbooks until the last moment. I told myself sacrifice was noble. I told myself being the strong one mattered. Then one evening when I was washing dishes while my parents toasted Olivia's acceptance into a well-known summer arts intensive, my father said it casually, like discussing the weather. When Olivia turns 18, we should get her the BMW. It suits her future. My mother nodded already, picturing the Instagram photos. I stood there with soap on my hands, staring at the sink as though something there would explain why expectation always flowed in one direction. I didn't argue. I just dried my hands slowly and returned to my room where a spreadsheet open on my laptop showed dwindling numbers. Around that time, a quiet pattern formed. Bills left on my desk, groceries I paid for without asking, gas for their car because they were using mine again. My mother's casual reminder when I hesitated. "You're older, Ava. You understand family duty." Duty, a word that sounded like tradition but felt like chains. There were moments when my father explained it almost poetically. "We invested more in Olivia. She needs to shine." Shine. I wondered what word they would use for me. Support, sacrifice, background. I once tried to bring up tuition options for myself. My mother smiled gently as if I was a child asking for a pony. "Don't worry, dear. You're practical. You'll find your way." Practical women do not shine. They hold everything together while pretending not to notice the imbalance. I swallowed tears and cleared the table. One night, when Olivia came home waving brochures for a college consultant who charged more per hour than I earned in a week, my parents praised her ambition. My mother looked at me over her wine glass and said softly, "Your sister will go far. We all must help her get there." We, meaning me, meaning I would continue patching holes in a life that was not mine. At the library, I watched teenagers studying planning futures full of possibility. I listened to patrons discussing universities' internships, dreams they spoke aloud without fear. I stacked books, slowly imagining my life unfolding somewhere else. But every time I walked into our house, the walls whispered obligations. "Olivia needs this. Olivia deserves that. You understand you're older." When my bank balance hit a number that made escape feel possible, something always happened. A car repair, a house service bill, a charity donation my mother asked me to cover because the checkbook was in the other room and donors were watching. She never reimbursed me. She always thanked me softly in ways that sounded like affection but tasted like expectation. I learned to stop expecting anything back. I learned that in our home, love was transactional and my currency was silence. Olivia, meanwhile, existed in a world where life unfolded like silk. Birthday brunches at Grace Farms, meetings with SAT tutors flown in from New York, shopping trips to Greenwich Avenue for dresses she would wear once. She never questioned the invisible labor that protected her comfort, because invisible labor was meant to stay invisible. I disappeared quietly, one sacrifice at a time. Yet something small and stubborn inside me kept track. Every dollar lost, every bill laid on my desk, every moment my dreams were labeled excessive while hers were destiny. Over time, resentment settled in my bones, not loud or dramatic, but steady like a slow leak. I became fluent in silence. But silence does not always mean obedience. Sometimes it is a seed, and even in darkness, seeds learn how to grow. One night, after handing over the last of my summer savings to cover a catering deposit, my mother forgot I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My chest ached, not from anger, but from realization. Sacrifice was not noble when it was demanded, not given, and duty meant nothing when it drained you into nothingness. That night, I whispered into the dark, barely audible even to myself, "This is the last time." My voice trembled but held. It was not rebellion yet, just truth beginning to sharpen. I did not know then what the world would take from me before I walked away. I only knew one thing with startling clarity. I would not fund someone else's future at the cost of my own. Silence, I realized, could be armor, and soon silence would turn into power. Sometimes awakening does not feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like paper shifting a soft sound in a quiet house, tiny and steady and impossible to ignore once you finally hear it. Mine began the morning after I whispered that vow to myself. I sat at the breakfast table across from my parents who were discussing Olivia's 18th birthday caterers like generals planning a coronation. They never noticed I barely touched my toast. They never saw the way my mind was already leaving the room. I smiled politely, nodded at the right times, and tucked my phone deeper into my pocket, where a screenshot weighted the address of a credit union in Norwalk open at 9 a.m. That afternoon, between shelving biography returns and helping a patron scan documents I asked for my lunch early, I walked to the bus stop like I always had, like nothing inside me had shifted. The credit union building was small brick humble in a way that felt sacred. When I handed over my ID and whispered I'd like to open a new account, something fluttered in my chest like a trapped bird suddenly learning it had wings. The teller smiled without questioning why a girl in nice clothes looked like she was shaking. Opening that account felt like drawing a breath after years underwater. I deposited the cash tips I had collected from library patrons who insisted on rewarding kindness. It was not much. It was everything. That night, while Olivia sat on the sofa planning outfits for a gala and my mother ironed linen napkins for a brunch she wanted to outshine the Shaws with, I quietly took photos of every important document I owned: birth certificate, passport, driver's license, college acceptance letters, work pay stubs, the papers of a life I had supported but had never owned. I uploaded them to a cloud folder labeled poetry drafts. I emailed copies to myself. I placed the originals in a plain manila folder and slipped it behind old tax handbooks in my room. Every task felt like stitching a parachute in secret. At the library, my coworker Mrs. Rivera noticed first. She was in her early 60s, calm eyes, soft voice, the kind of woman who saw quiet pain before it spoke. One evening, as I filed circulation receipts, she said gently, "You've been searching tenant rights websites. Need help?" My throat tightened. I could have lied, but something in her tone felt like safety. "I just want to be prepared for options," I whispered. She did not pry. She simply nodded, slid a sticky note across the counter, and walked away. It had 2 phone numbers, local legal aid, and a domestic support hotline. I exhaled shakily, folding it into my wallet like a talisman. At home, I played the role perfectly. I asked Olivia about her classes. I offered to help my mother polish silver trays. I told my father his schedule seemed intense this week. They believed me because obedience had always been my currency, but my silence no longer belonged to them. It belonged to my exit. At night, after everyone slept, I researched low-income legal consultations and read state laws on financial coercion. I learned the phrases coerced economic dependency and emotional duress. I repeated them quietly like prayers. I pulled up rental listings in Stamford tiny studios with chipped cabinets, window A, C units, and rent numbers that made my stomach twist. But they also had front doors that locked from the inside. They had kitchens too small for dinner parties and windows that let sun in without expectation. They were imperfect. They were mine in possibility. One listing had a view of the train line. Every time I imagined hearing those trains at night, I felt something like hope. During breaks at work, I printed articles on tenant protection, emergency orders, bank fraud prevention. I stored them in a binder labeled Library Program Archive. Not one person asked to see it. I slipped $50 a week into my pocket before going home, telling myself small amounts were invisible. I checked my secret account balance nightly, heart racing like each digit was a brick on a bridge I was building. My parents talked constantly about Olivia's party. Guest list over 100. Balloons shaped like 18. Champagne tower. "She will enter adulthood in style," my mother said proudly, smoothing Olivia's hair, while I folded linen napkins in the kitchen. "And you'll help announce her surprise," she added without looking at me. "The surprise they assumed I would fund." I smiled softly and folded another napkin. I learned a new skill that month, the art of not reacting. My silence became the armor no one could see. I practiced breathing slowly, speaking gently, excusing myself quietly. I learned that rebellion did not always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like a daughter stirring sugar into her tea while planning her departure down to the bus schedule. I stopped trying to be seen. I started preparing to disappear. I counted cash in the privacy of the staff bathroom, each bill smoothing into a small stack of freedom. I ran through what-ifs like drills. What if they found out? What if they demanded the money back? What if someone called me dramatic, and each time I breathed through it? I realized fear does not vanish when you choose yourself. It simply stops owning you. My mother once tapped my hand lightly and whispered, "Olivia needs this moment, dear. You understand." And I nodded while inside something cold and steady whispered back, "I do understand. She will get her moment, and so will I." One night at closing, Mrs. Rivera placed a small envelope next to my checkout stamps. Inside was a folded bus route map to Stamford and a note in elegant handwriting. "When you're ready. No rush." Just remember, grown daughters deserve safety too. My eyes burned, but I did not cry. Crying felt too loud. Instead, I tucked the envelope into my coat and walked home with the quietest determination I had ever carried. I started packing in secret. First, the essentials documents, a spare phone charger, a toothbrush, 2 weeks of clothes rolled tight. I hid them in a reusable grocery tote behind winter coats no one touched. Every night, I whispered the same words before bed. Not yet, but soon. The house stayed beautiful. It also started feeling like a museum, polished, curated, soulless. I traced my fingers over the marble countertop one night and realized marble was just stone. Expensive, cold, heavy stone. And no matter how you polish it, it cannot warm your hands. The night before Olivia's party, I lay awake listening to laughter float up the stairs as my parents rehearsed speeches and Olivia opened gift bags from boutiques. I stared at my ceiling heart steady breath, calm. The world had taken from me piece by piece, but I had taken my power back quietly, thread by thread. Tomorrow, they expected obedience. Tomorrow, they expected a car key wrapped in a bow. Instead, tomorrow, I would give them the one thing they never anticipated. The sound of my silence finally breaking. I did not plan to scream. I did not plan to argue. I planned to say nothing until silence became the loudest truth in the room. I will leave quietly, I whispered into the dark, and it will be louder than any scream. The room stayed still. My heartbeat did not waver. For the first time in my life, silence felt like strength. And I finally felt like someone who was on her way out, not someone trapped inside. Tomorrow they would reveal a BMW. Tomorrow I would reveal myself. Tomorrow everything would break open. And I was ready. Morning arrived soft and golden sunlight gliding across the water outside our Westport home, as if the universe wanted to celebrate Olivia before she ever stepped outside. The backyard had been transformed overnight. White tents billowed like sails, crystal drink dispensers sparkled under trimmed hedges, and caterers in crisp shirts stacked champagne flutes beside a tower that looked engineered for magazine covers. An arch of giant silver balloons shaped the number 18, glittering so bright it almost hurt to stare. It looked like a wedding. It felt like a coronation. Guests arrived, early women in pastel dresses with pearls and blowouts that bounced when they laughed. Men in Vineyard Vines polos and boat shoes shook my father's hand as if networking was oxygen. Servers carried trays lined with mini lobster rolls, sparkling water bottles tied with satin ribbons, and tiny macarons that looked too perfect to eat. Everywhere I turned, there were flowers. Peonies, hydrangeas, roses in soft blush tones. Beauty layered on beauty, hiding the truth beneath like wallpaper over a crack. I moved through the space quietly, taking it in, not like someone admiring a celebration, but like someone who knew what came next. My mother floated past me, adjusting silverware, tapping a crystal spoon against glasses to listen for the right pitch. Olivia stood near the waterfront taking photos, her dress a soft champagne-color hair curled and glossy. She looked ethereal. She looked adored. She looked like everything I was raised to support and never be. My father rehearsed lines under his breath, swirling a glass as he tested the weight of the words he would deliver later. Pride dripped from every syllable. Legacy, excellence, our daughter. Then he turned to me, voice smooth. Ava, you will hand her the BMW keys right after the toast. Smile. This is family. I kept my face calm, a still lake with a storm gathering far beneath the surface. Saying no aloud would have been jarring loud explosive. Silence was steadier. Silence was steel. I nodded once, letting the illusion remain intact. My mother touched my arm, but it was not affection. It was choreography. You understand how important this is, she murmured. You have always supported her, and that support will show today. I smiled gently, the same smile I used in childhood when I realized some gifts were never meant for me. But inside, everything was different now. I had money tucked away in Norwalk, important papers hidden safely, bus routes memorized, a bag packed behind winter coats. My escape no longer felt like fantasy. It felt like a clock ticking. The early afternoon filled with laughter and camera shutters. Teenagers posed on the dock with sparkling drink sunlight catching the water behind them like liquid diamonds. Adults chatted about summer homes and internships and Ivy League consultants. Someone asked Olivia about her college plans, and she laughed lightly. I am so blessed. I always knew my family would pave the way for me. My parents beamed. I stayed by the drink table pouring lemonade for a little girl who looked at the world like it was endless. She thanked me with a shy smile. I felt something ache remembrance of a time when I too believed kindness earned fairness. Olivia's friends approached me once. They complimented the floral centerpieces like I was the event planner, then drifted off toward the photo backdrop without waiting for a reply. I watched them, heads thrown back in laughter, unaware of the invisible labor that made their world feel effortless. Music swelled through the speakers, soft jazz blending with waves lapping the shoreline. My father called for attention, tapping a crystal flute. Conversations hushed, phones lifted, cameras ready. He began his speech. He spoke of milestones of pride of Olivia's drive and grace. He spoke of responsibility and future success and how she would carry the Ellington legacy forward. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye dramatically. Guests murmured admiration. Olivia clasped her hands delicately, chin tilted in practiced humility. My father continued, and now a symbolic gift, a token of everything she has worked toward, and someone very special is going to present it. He looked at me. My name hovered in the air unspoken because I was supposed to exist without introduction. I was supposed to glide forward and place keys into Olivia's palm like a devoted supporting character. I held my hands still, my heartbeat steady. The crowd turned. Expectation rippled. I stood calm, breathing in ocean air as if it were courage. My father's smile tightened. My mother's eyes sharpened. Olivia's expression hovered between smugness and anticipation, already picturing the photograph moment. Cameras waited. I waited. Silence pooled around me like a hush before a storm. Then Olivia leaned forward with a laugh, trying to fill the quiet. I really am lucky, she said brightly. Not everyone has a sister willing to sacrifice so much. A few people chuckled. The word sacrifice struck like a bell. My breath did not shake. My shoulders did not tense. I simply looked at her and let stillness hold. For the first time in 25 years, they could not direct me. They did not own this moment. The absence of movement felt louder than any outburst. Confusion flickered across faces. Someone shifted uncomfortably. My father cleared his throat. Ava, dear. The keys. He extended his hand, slightly palm open, expecting obedience. The wind brushed my hair. Seagulls cried faintly in the distance. I let the silence stretch until it became undeniable, until it became a mirror. Then I gently folded my hands in front of me. I do not have any keys to give. Gasps. A few whispered, what? My mother's face froze mid-smile, a mask cracking. Olivia stared confused, turning to disbelief. Cameras tilted, recording now not for memory, but for shock. I stayed calm, my voice steady. Today is her celebration. It is not my responsibility to buy her future. My money will build my life, not fund someone else's dream. My words did not shake. The world around me did. A murmur rippled through the guests. Someone whispered they made her pay. Another voice, barely audible, said, good for her. My mother reached for my arm nails, digging lightly. We will discuss this later. Smile. I did not move. I felt the air shift, felt something in the ground beneath us change. For the first time, I did not bend. I stood, strong, quiet, unmoving, and the silence I held began to roar. If you have ever been expected to fund someone else's dream while yours waits in the shadows, you know this feeling. A moment when stillness becomes power. A moment when a life finally turns. Have you ever lived one? My father's voice still hung in the humid summer air, warm and polished, like the champagne flutes catching afternoon light. He had just finished praising Olivia's bright future, reciting her achievements, talking about legacy and excellence, while the breeze lifted linen tablecloths and the ocean shimmered like some grand blessing. Guests clapped politely, smiling as though they were witnessing a sacred rite. The Ellington heir stepping into adulthood. Then he tapped the glass again, more theatrically, this time the kind of gesture designed for attention and admiration. And finally, a moment we have all been waiting for, he announced, turning his body slightly as if positioning for a camera. Olivia's older sister has something very special for her. He did not say my name. He did not need to. The crowd parted expectant eyes landing on me, waiting for obedience for ceremony for the spectacle of a dutiful daughter handing over a luxury car key with grace and quiet pride. My parents stared like directors waiting for the cue. Olivia's smile sparkled. She tilted her chin just enough to appear angelic and superior at once. "Where's my car ribbon, Ava?" she teased, voice sweet in that practiced way like she expected the world to serve her on silver platters. People laughed. Phones lifted. Someone whispered, "I heard it is a BMW convertible." Another murmured, "This family never disappoints." Olivia extended her hand, palm open, already ready to receive. It was a gesture she had perfected since childhood, the entitled grace of someone used to catching dreams instead of building them. I looked at her hand, pale and manicured, trembling just slightly from excitement. My heart beat slow and steady, its rhythm steady as the tide. In another life, I might have folded. In another life, I would have smiled and stepped forward, a silent shadow fulfilling expectation. But this life was shifting beneath my feet like new earth forming, and I felt taller than I ever had without moving an inch. I lifted my chin just enough to meet her eyes. My voice was soft, almost tender. "There is no car." Silence did not fall. It crashed. Conversations choked off. A champagne flute paused in midair. Someone gasped. The laughter died so quickly it felt like oxygen had vanished from the garden. Olivia's smile froze, eyes widening as if she had misheard. "What do you mean, no car?" She laughed, voice faltering at the edges. "Dad, tell her this is one of those dramatic Ava moments." My father's jaw clenched. My mother's fingers dug into her clutch. I stayed still, rooted calm. "This celebration is yours," I said softly, "but I am not funding it. My money builds my future, not your image." Phones rose higher now, deliberate. A few guests exchanged stunned glances. Someone whispered, "Wait, did they make her pay?" The blush on Olivia's cheeks darkened. Her shock turned sharp, brittle. "Are you serious right now?" "On my day." "You are ruining my moment." She stomped one foot lightly like a child denied candy eyes, glassy with disbelief. My father stepped closer, tone low, like a warning. "Ava, enough. Do not embarrass your family. Hand your sister the keys and let us move forward." My mother leaned in, smile brittle like porcelain under pressure. "Smile. Fix this. Say you are joking. Now." Her whisper slithered through clenched teeth, desperate and enraged. I held their gaze. "I am not joking, and I will not perform." A ripple of whispers spread through the garden like wind through trees. "That girl has a backbone. They expected her to pay. Unbelievable." Olivia's voice rose shrill as it cracked. "I deserve that car. I earned it. You have done nothing but read books and hide in the library. You owe me." "Oh!" The word hit like a slap. Years of swallowed expectations echoed in that single word. I kept my posture, steady breath unbroken. "I owe nothing but the life I choose." Olivia's face contorted disbelief, melting into fury. She jabbed a finger at me. "You are jealous. You always have been. You want my life." I almost smiled, not out of humor, but out of the quiet tragedy that she truly believed it. My mother grabbed my forearm nails, biting lightly into my skin. "We will speak later," she hissed. "You will apologize. You will fix this." I gently pulled my arm back, the motion small yet seismic. "No!" Gasps fluttered like startled birds. A woman near the roses covered her mouth, whispering. She stood up to them. Another murmured that poor girl into her husband's shoulder. Olivia's voice rose again, shrill and cracking. "You ruined my day! You ruined everything! How dare you!" Her hand shot toward my shoulder, a shove fueled not by strength but by entitlement and panic. I steadied myself without stepping back, the physical restraint a boundary she could no longer cross. "Do not touch me." My tone was soft, unshaken. The softness made it sharper. My father's composure fractured. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a dangerous low. "You are humiliating this family. You will regret this." And still, I did not break. I looked at him with the same calm I used to reserve for quiet evenings in the library when I learned how to breathe without permission. "I am not humiliating this family," I said gently. "I am simply not paying for its performance anymore." That sentence split the world open. A guest whispered, "Oh my God!" Another set down his champagne eyes, narrowing like he had just witnessed truth peel back the glossy facade of privilege. Olivia stomped forward again. "You think you are better than us because you saved a few dollars. Dad, tell her to stop. Tell her she cannot do this. Tell her she has to buy it." The desperation in her voice was almost childlike. My father's jaw tightened, veins pulsing at his temple. "Apologize right now. Smile. Bow your head. Hand her the keys. Then maybe we will forget this ever happened." The crowd waited, breathless, suspended. I lifted my chin, feeling the ocean breeze brush my hair, tasting salt and freedom on my tongue. I did not yell. I did not tremble. I spoke clearly, gently. "I am not apologizing for choosing my life." A hush swept over the space like a cathedral gone silent. Olivia let out a strangled cry. "You are destroying this family! You have always been a burden, ungrateful, invisible until now." I felt the words, and they did not bruise me. They bounced off armor built over years of quiet wounds. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I only said, "I hope someday you understand that love is not ownership." My mother's voice cracked like thin ice. "Smile, smile, Ava. Smile and do not ruin us." I met her eyes, soft sadness in mine. "I am not ruining us." The truth is, someone's phone camera zoomed in. This was the humiliation pivot. This was where their world cracked open. And it was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was simply honest. Olivia screamed, then a sharp, raw sound. Someone in the crowd flinched. The illusion shattered. And for the first time in my life, I did not move to catch the pieces. I let them fall. Because sometimes choosing yourself is the quietest, most earth-shaking act there is. If you have ever stood in a room full of applause meant for someone else while your own sacrifices stayed invisible, tell me, have you ever held silence so firmly it turned into strength? The silence that followed my refusal held the weight of a cathedral sacred and unbearable. My father's face tightened, pride cracking like porcelain under a sudden strain. He stepped forward, shoes pressing into the lawn with controlled fury, fingers curling around my upper arm in a grip that felt rehearsed, like he had trained for a moment where force would replace decorum. His smile never fully vanished, but his voice cut into my ear low enough for only me to hear. "You will not embarrass us. You will obey. You will make this right." His fingers dug in, not in a scene-breaking rage, but in a restrained violence only those raised in perfect households recognize, the kind meant to punish quietly. I did not flinch. I simply looked at him and said nothing, my silence suddenly heavier than his grip. My mother's expression trembled. "Smile," she whispered again, desperate now, the word cracking under pressure. "Just smile, Ava." Olivia stood nearby, shaking rage sparkling in her eyes like broken glass catching light. Her voice quivered. "You think you are noble. You think anyone cares about your boring struggle. This is my day." The crowd shifted unease, rippling through pastel fabrics and pearl necklaces. A woman in a lavender dress nervously tucked hair behind her ear. Someone whispered, "This is getting ugly." Another murmured, "She should not be forced to pay." My father tightened his hand until it felt like a vice breath cold against my ear. "You belong to this family. You do as we say." The sentence landed heavy, not shouted, but sharp enough to cut. Olivia's breath came fast and uneven. "Give me the keys. Give me the keys." My voice remained even. "There are no keys." Olivia's face twisted disbelief, melting into panic, then fury. She reached for a champagne flute as if to steady herself, but her hand shook and it slipped, crystal shattering across the patio with a sound that sliced the air. A ripple of gasps. She shoved me hard. My body jolted backward, shoes scraping stone. My father hissed, "Stop it, Olivia!" But it sounded less like protection and more like control slipping from his grasp. My mother lunged to grab me, fingers tangling in my hair, tugging with a frantic edge as she whispered through clenched teeth, "Fix this now. Smile. Apologize." My scalp burned her ring, catching strands as she pulled, not gently, not theatrically, just raw panic disguised as poise. I had endured brushes against my scalp for ballet buns she forced on me at 5 combs, tearing through tangles before church tight ponytails meant to keep me neat. This was not grooming. This was fear. This was power clawing to survive. The world tilted. Olivia shoved again, harder, shoulder slamming into mine, and the patio suddenly felt unsteady beneath my feet. I stumbled. A murmur rolled through the guests, soft, horrified like a hymn gone wrong. Someone whispered, "Call someone." Someone else breathed, "Don't interfere. They're the Ellingtons." My father's hand reached again instinctively to seize control, but in the scramble I twisted away and lost balance. My heel slid on a fallen champagne cork. The world tipped sideways. I felt the hard edge of the stone patio rush up. My head struck. A dull, heavy thud, not dramatic, not cinematic, just final and real and terribly human. A ringing sound filled my ears like distant church bells underwater. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. My mother froze mouth open mid-command. Olivia's hand hovered stupidly in the air, fingers still curled like she might shove again. My father's eyes widened not in concern but in horror that someone might see beyond the facade. A guest gasped loud enough to echo. Then, sound returned in pieces. Someone cried out. Someone else whispered, "Call 911, Tinum." This is serious." A neighbor near the fence clutched her chest. Voices rose, scattered, overlapping. My vision blurred at the edges, faces warped like oil paint dripping. I tried to sit up, but dizziness pulled me back. My father crouched, jaw tight, whispering with venom under his breath for only me to hear. "Get up! Now! You will not make a scene!" Olivia shook her head wildly, voice frantic. She fell. "She just lost her balance, Mom. Did you see?" She tripped. It sounded rehearsed, panicked improvisation. My mother nodded aggressively, voice strained and brittle. "Yes." She fainted. She fainted. Oh dear, she fainted. The lie spilled so fast it tripped over itself. A guest whispered, "I saw them push her." Another voice trembling said, "Someone film this." My father snapped his head toward the guests. "Phones down. Privacy. Family matter." But this was no longer a staged dinner or charity brunch. This was real. The polished mask was cracking and people saw through. My body felt heavy, my tongue thick, but breath still lived in my chest and with it a small ember of choice. A siren sounded faint in the distance, someone already calling for help despite my parents' frantic hisses for control. Olivia crouched beside me, face pale, whispering urgently, "Just say you fainted. Please, please do not ruin this. Do not ruin me. Me. Always her. Always the center." My mother's voice trembled, breath-shaking. "Smile when they arrive. Say you're dizzy. Say you skipped breakfast." I looked up at them, at the 3 people who taught me life through control and shame, and I felt no fear, only clarity. A paramedic rushed through the crowd with a stretcher, EMT in uniform, kneeling flashlight checking my pupils. "Miss, can you hear me?" "What happened?" My mother answered too quickly. She fainted. Low blood sugar. My father nodded sharply. Heat. Overwhelmed. The EMT looked to me instead. "Miss." I blinked slowly, vision clearing in shapes. My head throbbed. My heart beat steady, and though my voice was thin, it did not waver. "They hurt me." Gasps. A ripple through silk dresses and starched collars. My father flinched. My mother's breath shattered. Olivia whispered, "What are you doing?" Tears forming not grief, but fear. The EMT's expression hardened, professional, now alert. "We're taking her. Step back." My parents tried to argue she's fine, we will drive her, but protocol is not swayed by money when eyes are watching. I was lifted gently onto the stretcher straps, clipped oxygen mask placed. A woman near the hydrangeas whispered, "I always wondered." Another murmured, "Poor thing." The ambulance doors opened. My mother leaned in one last time, face cracked with panic disguised as concern. "Fix this. Say nothing." Olivia's voice trembled, desperate. "Ava, please." My father's jaw clenched, rage simmering beneath surface. "Think about what you are doing." I looked at them, not angry, not broken. Quiet. Resolute. "I already have." The stretcher rolled. The sky stretched above me, blue and endless. Fireworks began near the dock, bright bursts streaking across daylight for Olivia's grand finale, timed, choreographed, beautiful, meaningless. Their celebration exploded just as I was lifted into the ambulance, a life cracking open and another collapsing at the same time. Contrasts written in sky and stone. The door closed on glitter and gasps. Sirens rose. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was leaving their world instead of holding it up. Sometimes freedom looks nothing like triumph. Sometimes it looks like lying in the back of an ambulance while fireworks explode for the people who pushed you. Sometimes it looks like breathing steady and unbroken as a life built on silence finally gives way to truth. And sometimes the quiet girl being carried away is not the one falling apart. She is the one finally walking out. Hospital ceilings always look the same no matter how much money your zip code holds. Pale panels, soft fluorescent hum, the faint smell of antiseptic, and something sterile, clean, indifferent. I blinked awake to that ceiling, a slow return of sensation. Cool sheets beneath me, a weight across my chest from a blanket tucked in with care, and a dull ache pulsing at the back of my skull, like a drumbeat underwater. A nurse leaned over me, her touch gentle as she brushed hair from my face. Her voice carried that calm firmness only people who have seen too many emergencies can master. "You're safe now." The words landed like warm hands around my heart, steadying it. Safe. A foreign concept. I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw, as though silence itself had scraped me hollow. She lifted a small cup to my lips, ice water cooling my tongue, and something inside me trembled, not from fear, but relief. "They brought you in from a private residence," she continued softly. "Paramedics said you hit your head. We're going to take good care of you." She tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, maternal in a way I had never truly known. I managed a nod, though pain flared at the movement. The door opened. A police officer stepped in uniform, crisp expression, professional, but kind. He nodded to the nurse, then approached slowly, as if not to startle me. "Miss Ellington, I'm Officer Grant with Westport PD. Do you feel able to answer a few questions?" My throat tightened again, but I nodded. He pulled up a chair, careful, respectful. "We were called to a domestic disturbance. Witnesses stated there may have been physical contact leading to your fall. We want to make sure we understand what happened." The door cracked again. Another officer entered, female, clipboard in hand, gaze steady. "We're here to help you," she said gently. "You're not in trouble. We just want your truth." Truth. The word felt like oxygen. I swallowed, voice thin but clear. They hurt me. I did not embellish, did not tremble. I simply let the sentence exist, unadorned and undeniable. The officers exchanged a glance, something like resolution forming between them. The female officer scribbled a note. "Did they push you? Did someone grab you?" Hair pulled. I blinked slowly, memory flashing the shove. The glass my mother's hand tangled in my hair like regret with claws. "Yes," I whispered. "That happened." And then, quieter, like a confession shaped from years of unspoken ache, "They always do." The room stilled, the kind of silence that hangs when truth finally arrives and refuses to leave. The nurse's jaw tightened, not in anger toward me, but toward the invisible violence she had likely seen in 1,000 forms. "I'm calling the social worker now," she said. "It's protocol. You are not alone." The officers asked a few more questions. "Did you feel unsafe in the home? Do you want to pursue protection? Would you like someone present during further questioning?" I answered honestly. Yes. 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 Every yes felt like a door unlocking inside my chest. After they left, the nurse dimmed the lights and adjusted my pillow. Rest. You did the hard part. But rest was a myth when the world had just shifted beneath me. A knock sounded softly. A woman entered wearing a Navy badge lanyard. Social worker. Her eyes were warm, steady. "Hi, Ava. I'm Dana. I'm here to check on you and support you however you need. We received a mandatory report from EMS. Would you like to discuss your options?" For a moment, I felt 9 years old again, packing Olivia's ballet shoes, told to be mature, while my own needs shrank to nothing. But I was not 9. I was 25. And I had chosen myself. "Yes," I breathed. "I'd like to talk." She sat, pulled a folder, explained everything. Clearly domestic incident protocol victims' rights, emergency protective orders, follow-up procedures. She never spoke down to me. She spoke to me. "Your voice matters, Ava. You deserve safety." I nodded slowly, every word stitching itself into the cracks carved by years of dismissal. Another knock. The door opened, and for a heartbeat I tensed, expecting my parents to storm in with rage and denial. But instead, a familiar face stepped through. Gray suit, leather briefcase, steel blue tie. James Whitaker, my grandfather's trust attorney. A man who had attended my 10th birthday and given me a fountain pen instead of a doll. A man who looked at me not with performance, but with care. "Ava," he said softly, voice like a steady anchor. I came as soon as I heard. Something broke inside me, not pain, not fear, but a shuddering exhale of relief. Someone came for me, not to silence me, not to command me, for me. I swallowed hard. "How did you—" He lifted a folder. "The trust has emergency advisement alerts for any hospital admission under your name." Your grandfather insisted. My chest tightened, grief and gratitude twined together. My grandfather, my quiet ally, the only family member who ever saw me without shadow. He had thought about this, prepared for it, believed I might need protection one day, believed me before I even believed myself. James's gaze sharpened. "The police have already provided their initial incident explanation. Do you feel safe speaking openly?" I nodded. "Yes." He turned to the social worker. "We will be initiating emergency trust protection measures and a financial release provision." Her voice carried respect. "Absolutely. I will support the paperwork." James sat. He opened the folder with deliberate, calm hands, steady. "Your grandfather built a contingency clause into your trust. It activates in cases of family endangerment or coercion. With your statement, a police report, and medical documentation, we can activate it today." My breath hitched. "Today." His eyes softened. "Ava, your financial autonomy becomes effective immediately. You will have access to the full trust balance, authority over all assets, and your parents are legally blocked from accessing or directing any funds tied to your inheritance." A tremor ran through me. Years of sacrifice, of handing over paychecks, of swallowing dreams so someone else could shine, ending in one moment. I exhaled a sound half laugh, half sob. My voice came out thin. "I don't have to go back there." "No," he replied. "You never do." Dana, the social worker, placed a form on the tray. "With your consent, we will also file an emergency protective order. You will legally not be required to contact them or allow them near you." My vision blurred. I blinked and tears slipped anyway. Quiet trembling, not of pain, but release. The nurse returned, noticing the moment. She placed a hand on my forearm, gentle but firm. "You're doing the brave thing." "Not everyone does." I breathed again, deeper this time. James cleared his throat softly. "I do need your signature, Ava. With one stroke of ink, you take control of your life's resources." My hand shook, but I reached, took the pen, signed. My name never looked so much like freedom. The nurse smiled, smoothing my blanket like she was tucking safety around me. The door opened again. A hospital security guard stood there. "Ms. Ellington, your parents are in the lobby demanding access." My chest tightened, but only for a moment. James rose, voice calm, composed, lethal in politeness. "She is not to be contacted." Legal protections are already in motion. Social worker Dana added firm but warm. She has chosen safety. They will need to leave. The guard nodded and stepped away. No shouting, no threats reaching the room. Just a door, just boundaries, just peace growing quiet and sure. I leaned back into the pillow. The air tasted different, lighter, real. The police returned briefly to finalize questions, offering me a brochure for victim support services and a card with a crisis advocate's phone. Social worker Dana explained next steps. James reviewed interim financial protections. And through it all, the nurse returned occasionally to brush my hair back, offer water, adjust the blanket. That simple touch, gentle, caring, unforced, felt like childhood, rewritten in a single motion. When the room finally quieted, James paused at the door. "Your grandfather would be proud of you," he said softly. Then he added something that felt like truth, finally finding a voice. "You were never the weaker one. The world just tried very hard to make you believe it." And then he left. The room hummed in soft, fluorescent peace. I stared at the ceiling again, breathing steady, head-aching, but spirit rising. In that sterile white space with my head throbbing and my life fracturing open, I realized something profound. I was not broken. I was becoming. And when dawn would rise tomorrow, I would not be the girl behind someone else's life. I would be the woman building her own. Quietly, fiercely, unapologetically. For the first time in my life, safety was not something I earned through obedience. It was something I claimed, and no one could take it back. Courtrooms always look colder than they feel like marble and wood cannot possibly hold the weight of family history inside them. The day of the hearing arrived heavy and still, Connecticut's summer humidity pressing against the courthouse windows as if the weather itself understood that truth was about to be pried open and examined in public light. I sat beside James, my grandfather's attorney hands folded loosely in my lap, the faint scent of hospital antiseptic still clinging to my sweater. I no longer felt dizzy, though the bruise along my temple throbbed quietly. I had slept in a safe apartment arranged by legal advocates, tiny but clean walls blank like a fresh page. Across the aisle sat my parents, poised as always, dressed in muted wealth. My father in a navy suit tailored to perfection, my mother in cream silk pearl earrings gleaming like armor. Olivia sat between them, pale and sullen eyes, flicking around the room like she could not believe she was here instead of at brunch. Their expressions were rehearsed, the concerned family wounded by misunderstanding, not abusers fighting to keep control. They had always been good at acting, but this was not their stage. A hush fell when the judge entered, robes, sweeping eyes stern and thoughtful. The clerk called the case protective order hearing domestic incident petition filed by Ava Ellington. I sat straighter, shoulders back, remembering the nurse's voice, "You're safe now." The judge reviewed papers, flipping through reports with deliberate calm. The ER photographs, the documented bruising on my arm and scalp, the EMT report, noting my whispered, "They hurt me," the police statements from 3 guests who saw physical contact, and video clips recorded by teenagers whose social feeds did not understand discretion, but did understand truth. My parents' attorney had tried to argue it was family tension, nothing harmful, exaggerated emotion. Their expressions now were painted sorrow. My mother dabbed a tissue at her eyes with the precision of someone accustomed to performing righteousness. My father sat upright, jaw tight, eyes flicking occasionally to the gallery, where 2 local reporters waited, pens ready. Olivia stared at her manicured nails as though boredom were a shield. When the judge finally looked at me, everything else quieted. "Miss Ellington, do you wish to make a statement?" My throat tightened. Every instinct from childhood whispered, "Do not make scenes, keep the peace, be small." But silence had served them long enough. Silence was not obedience anymore. It was choice. I rose slowly, steadying myself, palms relaxed at my sides. "Yes, Your Honor." My voice did not shake. For years, I believed staying silent would keep my family stable. I believed duty meant sacrificing myself. I paid bills. I covered obligations. I gave up my future so my sisters could shine. And when I tried to leave quietly, when I refused to fund a life that wasn't mine, they used force to pull me back into compliance. I paused, breath steady. Silence was the only safe way to leave. My father's attorney stood abruptly, but the judge raised a hand for him to sit. "Please continue." I glanced briefly at my parents. My mother's eyes flashed panic under the gloss. My father's jaw clenched. Olivia scowled as if I had betrayed her instead of simply refusing to be sacrificed. I looked away. "I do not hate them," I said softly. "I do not wish them harm. I simply want peace. I want safety. I want the right to decide my own life. For the first time in my life, I chose myself, and they tried to punish me for it." I sat. James placed a quiet hand over mine, his grip firm, grounding. The courtroom stayed still long enough to feel like a held breath. The judge adjusted Glass's expression, unreadable but softened. She addressed my parents. "The evidence demonstrates a coercive household dynamic and physical force used during a dispute. Given the hospital documentation and witness testimony, I find grounds to grant a full no-contact order." My mother inhaled sharply, a wounded gasp, like someone had slapped her image instead of her actions. My father's face went blank, the way men crumble privately when power is stripped in public. Olivia's lips parted disbelief, trembling into fear. The judge continued, "This order will remain in effect for 1 year minimum. Violations will result in criminal charges. Miss Ellington is granted exclusive control of her trust assets and financial independence." I breathed again, deeper this time. A line in the air felt drawn before and after. Then consequences began to trickle out like quiet dominoes falling. First came my father's firm. Their compliance officer sat in the back row, an expression stiff as stone. Financial institutions do not like scandals. A suspension notice circulated 2 days later, citing reputational review. Charity boards follow quickly. My mother's email invitation to chair a gala vanished. A polite but cold message arrived: "Due to recent events, we are pausing your involvement." Prestige evaporates fast when headlines whisper truth, and whisper they did. Connecticut Gazette ran a side column beneath society announcements: "The Ellington Scandal. Domestic dispute raises questions at prominent family's event." No graphic details, no sensational language, just enough to curdle reputation. Neighbors folded into clusters on sidewalks, murmuring what everyone already suspected but never said. It's always the perfect houses. The ones with spotless windows hide the darkest rooms. Olivia's world trembled last. The college she had nearly secured, the one she boasted about, the one she believed she deserved as birthright, sent a polite but pointed email. "In light of recent public conduct concerns, your admission is rescinded. Conduct not grades. Character not test scores. Actions not privilege." Olivia stormed onto her social feeds, posting vague quotes about betrayal, loyalty, family tearing each other down. But the video clips spreading quietly among Westport teens did not lie. Her voice captured demanding a car she believed she was owed. Her shove half caught on camera. My body falling out of frame, and one line repeated most in captions: "My money builds my future, not your image." Some called me brave. Some called it family tragedy. But anyone who had ever swallowed a life for someone else saw themselves in that moment. A librarian left a daisy at my workplace cubby. A retired nurse emailed a simple message: "I wish I had found my voice sooner." A woman at a grocery store glanced at me and whispered, "You are not alone." These were not crowds or applause. They were threads of quiet solidarity, the kind women carry without asking. The courtroom emptied slowly. My parents rose stiff and offended, as though dignity could be ironed back into place. My mother tried one last tactic voice, trembling, brittle. "Ava, you will regret humiliating us." I turned gently. "No. I regret staying silent for so long." Olivia stood behind her mascara-smudged chin, quivering. "You ruined my life." Her words once would have broken me. Now they sounded small. "I did not ruin it," I replied softly. "I simply stopped building it for you." James guided me toward the hallway. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready. I did not speak to them. I did not need to. Truth had already walked out with me. Outside, sun poured over courthouse steps, warm and cleansing. I paused at the bottom, drawing air into lungs that finally expanded fully. Westport Town Square felt different, smaller, kinder. Mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rivera at the library. "Proud of you, mija. Remember, new chapters require courage." Another from the social worker. Let me know when you're ready to finalize long-term safety plan and support resources. And one more from an unknown number that I knew came from my parents' home phone despite blocking, "Come home. Fix this. We are family." I stared at the screen, a fragile echo of old chains. Then I pressed delete. Family builds you, not destroys you. And the ones who break you do not get to claim you when you stand. As I walked toward the street, the breeze lifted hair off my shoulders, light and freeing. A group of teens on bikes rolled past, whispering, "That's her." Not mocking, not judging, just witnessing. I kept walking. Every step felt like reclaiming bone breath blood time. Court orders and lost reputations did not heal old wounds, but they protected the space where healing could finally begin. And sometimes that was enough. I did not look back at the courthouse. I did not need to. I had walked out of their world and into mine. The gavel had not freed me. I had freed myself long before it struck. All it did was make the world acknowledge what I had already claimed. And when the sun touched my face warm and steady, I finally believed it. Silence once protected them. Now silence protects me. Freedom did not arrive with fireworks or grand declarations. It came in the form of a key sliding into a doorknob in a tiny Stanford studio apartment, metal against metal, a soft click like a whisper, saying you're home now. Whatever home means when you've never really had one before. The apartment was small enough that if I stretched my arms, I could almost touch both walls. A single window faced the train tracks, and every morning the commuter line rumbled past a low hum that might have annoyed someone else but comforted me. Trains meant movement, escape, people going places by choice instead of being born into expectations. When I first stepped inside, there was no furniture except a thrifted mattress on the floor and a folding table someone from a local women's support group had delivered. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and dust and possibility. I set my bag down and just stood there for a long moment, breathing in silence that belonged only to me. No footsteps clicking sharply down the hallway. No distant sigh of disappointment waiting to land on my shoulders. Just quiet. Quiet like a held breath turning into a real one. I sat on the floor and let myself feel it. Not joy exactly, not yet. Something more tender. Relief braided with exhaustion. A life not yet lived settling around me like soft morning light. That first night, I heated a can of soup on a portable burner and sat cross-legged, eating slowly, like every spoonful mattered. I burned my first grilled cheese the next afternoon, smoke curling up like a small rebellion. I laughed quietly at first, then louder, surprising myself. There was no one to scold me for mistakes, no one to suggest I should do better. A burnt sandwich could simply be a burnt sandwich. It did not define me. The next morning, I found a small pothos plant in a grocery store clearance cart, its leaves drooping but alive. I bought it for $4 and placed it on the windowsill. "You and me both," I whispered. "We grow in the quiet." I named it Hope. It surprised me how easily naming things came now that I finally had something of my own. Therapy began the following week. Every Tuesday at 3 p.m., I walked past cafes and small bookstores and sat in a cozy room with warm lamps and tissues tucked discreetly into ceramic holders. My therapist, Dr. Monroe, had gentle eyes and the kind of voice that never rushed. In our first session, she leaned back slightly and asked, "Who is Ava when she isn't performing for someone else?" The question sat between us like a stone, dropped into still water. I did not have an answer then. But each week, I peeled back layers duty shaped into identity obedience, mistaken for love, silence used as survival. Sometimes I cried softly, tears slipping down without force. Sometimes I simply breathed and listened to the clock tick. Sometimes I stared at my hands and wondered how many futures they had held for others before ever touching one for myself. Healing wasn't loud. It was slow, patient, uneven. Some mornings I woke up heavy, my chest tight with habit, waiting for instructions that no longer came. Other mornings I opened my eyes to sunlight spreading across the hardwood floor like a blessing and felt light enough to float. Stanford wasn't glamorous. The trains rattled, the walls were thin. My mattress sat directly on the floor. but each imperfection felt earned, like these walls were honest in a way marble floors never were. I bought secondhand dishes one Saturday, mismatched plates that felt like a mosaic of new beginnings. I learned how to cook pasta without overboiling it. Though the first week I ate so much spaghetti, I joked silently to myself that I might turn into noodles. I burned toast twice in a row one morning and just opened the window, watching smoke drift out like memories leaving. I would not have traded that moment for all the catered meals of my past. At night, the trains rumbled, shaking the window slightly, and I found myself soothed by the sound. They reminded me that life moved on rails, stretching into places I hadn't seen yet, futures waiting quietly. I began journaling. Not grand essays, not poetic speeches, just truth spilled onto paper, shaky handwriting and ink smudges in sentences like, "I do not owe pain to earn peace." Or today I breathed without permission, or one day I will stop flinching at kindness. I wrote letters I never planned to send. Dear Olivia, I hope one day you learn to build instead of take. Dear Mother, silence is not obedience. Dear Father, power without love is not strength. Dear Ava, you are allowed to exist without apology. Each word rewove a life unraveled by expectation. I started volunteering once a week at the Stamford Library, tutoring younger girls in reading. They reminded me of myself at that age, bright eyes, eager hands clutching books, the world still wide and unwritten. One afternoon, a shy 12-year-old girl with hair pulled tight asked, "Why do adults get to decide everything?" I paused, then whispered back, "They don't. Not forever." Her eyes lit like a match. I knew then that healing was not just about leaving something behind, but building something new, offering light where darkness once lingered. I bought a cheap rug in warm beige and rolled it out soft under my feet in the mornings. I made tea in dollar store mugs. I learned to meditate for 5 minutes a day, breathing slowly while sunlight warmed my face. Some mornings I walked to the small beach before dawn, sand cool beneath my sneakers, ocean stretching out like forgiveness. I sat and let waves speak where words could not. I learned that loneliness and peace sometimes share a border, and it takes time to learn which side you're on. I decorated slowly, one gentle touch at a time. A thrifted lamp with a soft yellow glow. A wooden chair with chipped paint that I sanded myself. A single framed photograph of the ocean at low tide. My space became a sanctuary not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. Freedom, it turned out, was quieter than I imagined. It lived in warm light hitting a blank wall. It lived in the choice to stay in bed 5 more minutes without guilt. It lived in the first deep breath each morning. Not one stolen in fear, but one earned in peace. Sometimes memories flickered like old film, my mother's manicured hand adjusting napkins, my father's voice dripping pride only when someone watched Olivia spinning in new dresses like the world made her crown. But those memories came softer now, less like wounds and more like chapters closed. My therapist once said, "Scars are proof of survival, not shame." I traced that truth often. On slow afternoons, I allowed myself small luxuries, reading by the window, walking through farmers markets, listening to jazz while making dinner. I did not rush healing. I did not chase a new identity. I let the world settle around me like snow, one quiet flake at a time. Hope the plant began to perk up, leaves stretching toward sun. I watered it every morning with the tenderness of someone learning how to care without sacrificing themselves. One evening after a long therapy session about boundaries and belonging, I cooked a grilled cheese again. I didn't burn it. I sat cross-legged on the floor plate in my lap, watching the last of sunset streak pink and gold across the sky. And without prompting, without effort, a smile rose inside me, real, soft, steady. I had not earned this peace through suffering. I had simply claimed it, and claiming it felt like reclaiming myself. Healing wasn't a destination. It was this: morning trains, soft lamp glow, warm toast, the sound of turning keys in a lock that belonged only to me, breathing freely in 4 walls not meant to impress anyone. The world no longer demanded performance. I no longer asked permission to exist. One evening, as I watered hope, I realized something profound. I was no longer surviving. I was living, quietly, fully, finally, A year has a way of softening even the sharpest edges, sanding down moments that once felt unbearable until they rest like smooth stones in the palm. 12 months passed like a series of quiet sunrises, each one carrying me farther from the life I once lived and deeper into the life I chose. Seasons shifted outside my Stamford window. Train whistles marked time more reliably than clocks. My little plant Hope grew 3 new leaves. On the anniversary of the party, the day that cracked my life open, I woke early brewed tea in my chipped blue mug and caught the morning train. Not to return, not to mourn, just to witness who I used to be and who I had become. The ride felt dreamlike, tracks humming beneath me, familiar shoreline, passing like a memory fading into watercolor. I stepped off at Westport Station and walked the tree-lined streets. Wealth still clung to the neighborhood like perfume-groomed hedges, glossy SUVs, smiling couples jogging with expensive strollers. But I saw it differently now. It no longer held power over me. It was scenery, not destiny. Their gates were not walls around my world anymore. When I reached my parents' former house, I stopped across the street. The manicured lawn was still there, but something had changed. A faded for sale sign leaned slightly as if tired of waiting. The windows looked hollow. Perfect houses always look lonelier once the performance ends. I felt no triumph, no bitterness, only a quiet understanding sometimes collapse is the only honest ending for a facade built on control. My phone buzzed that evening when I returned home. An email notification subject line, reconnect. My parents' tone was familiar, laced with denial, dressed as longing. They wrote about misunderstandings, about family bonds, about healing. They did not acknowledge harm. They asked to return to normal. There was no apology, only the desire to reclaim what they lost. I closed the message softly, like laying down an object too fragile to shatter. Then I deleted it. Some doors should not reopen. A week later, a direct message from Olivia appeared on social media. The tone was not cruel like before. It was clipped, fragile, resentful, but laced with fear. Ava, I need help. My financial aid fell through. They canceled my campus housing. Can you loan me something? I read it twice. The irony settling like a feather, not heavy, not sharp, simply true. My thumb hovered for a moment. Then I typed, I hope you learn to help yourself. No anger, no revenge, just honesty. I pressed send and felt the last thread between us dissolve, gentle as dust floating in afternoon sun. Healing isn't only finding your own footing. Sometimes it's refusing to become the footing for someone else again. In the fall, I enrolled in a community writing class. It felt unassuming at first, plastic chairs, mismatched mugs of tea pens, scratching paper, but each week something in me unfurled. I wrote stories about quiet girls who learned to speak, and oceans that forgave, and rooms where no one raised their voice unless it was in joy. My professor, a soft-spoken woman with silver streaks in her hair, pulled me aside after class one day. You write like someone who had to earn her voice, she said. And now that you have it, you protect it. I swallowed emotion like warm tea on a cold morning. She handed me a flyer. Fellowship program, writing residency, space to create. I believe you belong there. I took the paper with trembling hands. Belong. A word I had never been offered freely before. The acceptance email came 2 weeks later. Fellowship granted. Tuition covered. Studio workspace by the river. I stared at my screen breath suspended, then slowly exhaled into a smile that felt like dawn breaking behind my ribs. I celebrated alone that evening, not out of loneliness, but out of peace. I made tea curled up beside my window and watched rain streak down the glass drops, racing each other like children running toward something joyful. The city lights blurred softly beyond them, shimmering reflections dancing across wet pavement. In the quiet rhythm of rainfall and cooling tea, I let the moment settle in my bones. Outside, trains passed with a low hum. Not rushed, not urgent, simply moving forward. Like me, I did not miss the marble floors or the chandeliers or the echo of footsteps that never brought comfort. I missed only the girl I used to be, the one who tried so hard to earn love by disappearing. But she didn't vanish. She transformed. She learned that leaving is not betrayal when staying means losing yourself. She learned that silence can be protection until speech becomes freedom. She learned that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is choose peace even when the world calls it selfish. I lifted my mug warm against my palms and whispered into the quiet room, not as a declaration, but as truth. I did not betray my family. I ended a prison. Outside, the rain eased. Inside, the glow of my small lamp filled the room like a heartbeat. It was enough. I was enough. If you've ever stepped away from a life that demanded you shrink to fit inside it, I see you. And if you're still learning how to breathe beyond expectations, that breath counts as victory too. Have you ever chosen peace over family expectations? Tell me your city so we know how far our courage travels.